As they say, hindsight is 2020. Will the wisdom of the past enlighten our future? Or are facts even a part of politics? Let's find out today. You're listening to the Roundtable Podcast, episode on the 2020 election, with your host, Shogun, and special guest, Richard Dawson.
Thank you very much, Wolven Rain. Thank you to our live audience, to Tech for our recording, and especially to my special guest today, Mr. Richard Dawson, joining me on Super Bowl Day, Super Bowl Sunday. Is that what they call it? Yeah, the Super Bowl. Yeah, I'm not a football guy. Anyways, we're going to discuss today 2020 American politics, not just the presidential election, but the whole scenario. So without further ado, Mr. Richard Dawson, would you tell us what you can about your background and interest in this?
Sure. So I went to both college and grad school for political science. I've had a little bit of campaign experience with various elections in college and grad school. And so this is just one of my passions of mine is following all these elections and what's going to happen in 2020.
Okay, great. So we have a studio audience, so anybody's welcome to join in with questions or just freely discuss here. Nevertheless, why don't you just start by giving us your basic analysis of this situation? Who are the front runners? Who are the most likely presidential candidates? And who is this race really going to be between, in your opinion?
Sure. So you, excuse me. So you have to break it down into all the various caucuses and primaries. So the reason we're doing this tonight is that the Iowa Democratic Caucus is tomorrow. And currently, Bernie Sanders is actually out in front. And this isn't too surprising because the Iowa Democratic Caucus goers are usually quite liberal. There's not a lot of minority support in the caucus. There is a growing Hispanic bloc in Iowa. And for whatever reasons, Sanders seems to do better with the white voters, whereas Joe Biden, who's running in Iowa, seems to have the African American bloc locked down. And so obviously Joe Biden is going to be the front runner in South Carolina, so it's up to Sanders to have a clean sweep in Iowa and in New Hampshire, which is next week.
I see. And how would you assess Bernie Sanders' chances? Do you think there's any possibility really that he becomes the president of the United States in 2020?
Well, let's see. Let's take the Democratic nomination first. I would say it's unlikely that he will be the nominee, although right now I'd say it's a 60-40 chance that for between Biden and Sanders. So I think Sanders has a real chance, but I think Biden will still pull it out in the end. Now, the reason I'm still hesitant is because the vast majority of people only start paying attention to the campaigns after the Iowa and New Hampshire primaries and caucuses. So
what about, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, if Sanders can win New Hampshire and Iowa, he'll come into South Carolina with a much stronger momentum. And although Biden is still likely to win South Carolina, if Sanders can keep South Carolina close, and especially win Nevada, then it's a whole new ballgame.
What about Buttigieg? What do you think about him? I've been watching some stuff. So I watch a lot of like independent news stuff all over the place, and they're starting to trickle in some of these candidates all over the place. Like Dora will have people. I can't remember which one I just watched Buttigieg on, and then Buttigieg showed on Bill Maher. He did a quick quip on Bill Maher this week.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the latest poll, and the reason I'm hesitating here as well is because what was considered the gold standard of polling, the Iowa Des Moines Registered poll, which is released the day before the caucus, was actually canceled this year because for some odd reason, Pete Buttigieg was not included as one of the candidates. So the Des Moines Register decided to scrap the poll entirely. And so the last poll we have, according to Real Clear Politics, is from Emerson, and they have Buttigieg running at 15%. And so he's tied with Biden he's behind Biden at 21, and even running at half the support of Sanders, who is running at 28. And because Buttigieg has almost even less African American support than Sanders, Buttigieg, his only real shot is to win in Iowa and New Hampshire. If he doesn't break the top two tomorrow, then his campaign is essentially over.
Yeah. What Trump made an interesting tweet about Bloomberg. He, I think it was something like, he's just paying to get me to like help, add in more like bullshit because Bloomberg has a bunch of money to spend.
Well, I mean, Bloomberg obviously wants to be president. The problem is he wore out his welcome in New York City with stop and frisk and all of those other policies. And he's
What a weird.
Yeah, he was a former registered Republican, and so the idea that in a more liberal Democratic primary season that he's going to come in and save the day was always a pipe dream from the beginning. And actually, his appearance in the primary actually supports Sanders more because the Bloomberg's likely voters would have been towards Buttigieg or Klobuchar. So the fact that he actually got in is actually a boon to Sanders and Warren supporters.
Yeah, well, Trump was actually a registered Democrat too back in the day. Like, this is what's funny about politics, man. They can do flippity flops. Warren was too, wasn't she? She was a Republican.
Well, Warren was a Republican, I believe, until the 1990s. I want to say 1994 is when she made the switch.
Yeah.
However, that's pretty normal for a lot of the northeastern voters. It's like Vermont until 1992. Vermont was one of the most reliably Republican states in the country. But when the Republican Party decided on their Southern strategy of courting Southern evangelical white voters, they left their Northeastern contingent out to dry. And now Vermont and Maine and New Hampshire are close to reliably Democratic. I want to say Trump was the first candidate, I want to say, since 1988, who got some support in Maine. In Maine, in 2016, he won one congressional vote from the second district because Maine is one of the is like Nebraska, in which they split up their votes by congressional district.
It kind of reminds me of California, how it was really Republican for a long time. Slowly got eaten alive.
Well, I mean, the problem with California is everyone likes to think that it was increased immigration which turned the state blue. That was part of it. The biggest reason behind it is in 1994, then Governor Pete Wilson, a Republican, supported Proposition 187, which mandated English only, in public schools. And I want to say it was English only throughout public services.
Well, it seems like that the reason for that would be the population in there. I mean, the economy in California was what, like 6th in the world, the global economy, and then Texas, and then like Russia. Like, they had so many people that they would do a lot of test things out there. Like I grew up out there too, and like I remember Gray Davis, and after him.
Right, but I mean, the problem with it was California Proposition 187, and actually, it was actually I misspoke. It was actually more. It wanted to create a state-run citizenship screening program and prevent illegal immigrants from using state services, and the campaign was run as a blatant anti-immigrant campaign. And the reason I say this was the biggest impact is that Texas has a similar proportion of demographics. However, they never had a what's termed as a Pete Wilson moment in their state's history. Now that is changing. For instance, in 2010, Governor Rick Perry, when asked about Arizona's similar law, SB 1070, he said, "Well, that would never work in Texas because we honor our immigrant community." However, by 2018, you have an anti-sanctuary city movement arising in Texas, which could challenge the Republican Party's dominance in Texas.
So do you think that Yang is going to be a significant figure in this election at all, or not?
No. The only way he'll have a significant impact is if two things happen. Both are unlikely. One is that he's chosen as the VP candidate, and the other if he wants to run a third-party campaign. And I would say, as of right now, the probability of both of those happening is relatively low.
I think what he brought to the table, though, with the concept of I put that conversation into the medium, and that's a very important conversation to have, because there will be a day where automation literally fucks everybody over. You know, it's not it may not be quite as quick as everyone thinks, but it's going to happen. You know what I mean? It's just inevitable.
Oh yeah. I'm definitely a fan of him being in the campaign and bringing those issues up. My issue with Yang is that he has a great message. He has a great family history. It's just that his time to shine in the debates was never really utilized well. He never really asserted himself. In the time he did have, he sounded like an economics professor. Whereas in those moments where you only have 30 seconds to a minute, you have to be very passionate. You can't come across as an aloof economist.
Well, yeah. See, my thing with the candidates, whenever I watch their debates, whenever I see them on news and stuff like that, I know it's hip and cool to rip on Trump, but like, let SNL do it. You know what I mean? Like, let the comedians rip on Trump, and don't lower yourself to that tier of it, because it's kind of goofy. I mean, I know Trump does it because he's just a fucking character, but none of these guys are characters, right? They're not going to be able to do it like he does. So when they try and rip on him, it's just like, just let SNL do it. You know what I mean? Like,
well, another problem that you're getting at is that whenever in a Democratic debate you say Trump is bad, number one, you're wasting time because everyone on the stage agrees that Trump is bad. And number two, a lot of voters who want to focus on the individual policies are going to probably rightfully accuse you of just saying Trump is bad. Let's not talk about the differences in our policies and let's just move on.
Yeah, because I've noticed that a lot with a lot of the little independent stuff that I see when they make their little 10 second or whatever 1 minute like stop ends on these shows and stuff, and that's kind of late. They always have a fucking Trump joke, and it's like, whatever. I mean, I get it. You can make fun of him easily. He's very easy to make fun of.
Well,
But
the two candidates that ran into that the most, in my opinion, were one is still in Amy Klobuchar, wanted to be position herself as the anti-Trump, and then Kamala Harris, who kept badgering Senator Warren to say, well, why don't you support banning Trump off of Twitter?
Well, see, that wouldn't fly. Come on, you can't really do that. That'd be dumb.
I mean,
But
you
man,
can't have
no offense, it would be
it
the most
showed-
ridiculous thing in the world. Like that would get Twitter fucking probably antitrusted down like real fast. What was I going to say though? Well, so Buttigieg did it. He makes the bone spurs joke because he's military all the time. I see Yang multiple times, like literally seen the same joke like 4 or 5 times on different showings, and so Yang does it sometimes. I mean, it's like Trump fucked up and is the bull in the china shop that's making all these like fucking comments capable in the marketplace, but like they're just not funny. You know what I mean? And if they were funny, they don't do it right, and it's just anyway. I'm kind of rambling on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, a joke here and there is fine, but my bigger issue is that when you take your 30 seconds to a minute to only talk about that, and you leave your policy ideas out the door.
So I personally think Biden is an ancient and needs to just take a nap. I mean, I don't know about you. I think he's too old. I just think, like.
Well, I mean, Biden and Sanders are quite old. Warren isn't really a spring chicken, but she's an adolescent compared to Biden.
But Biden like has this slowingness to him that Bernie doesn't seem to have. Bernie still seems like he's kicking it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't want to be like an asshole and ageist or whatever on it, but he just seems like he's hit it.
Also, Sanders never stopped running for president between 2016 and 2020.
Yeah, pretty much. It would be interesting if Hillary tried to do what's the vice VP with Biden or some shit. That way Biden has to like fucking retire early or something.
Well, I mean, Biden has already, I'm not sure how much this is going to hold, but he's already pledged to only run for one term. If he's the nominee, conventional wisdom would state that he would have to choose someone significantly to his left in order to shore up the left-wing base of the Democratic Party.
Well, yeah, and these the DNC and the Democratic Party itself would be the one running the country at that point anyway. I mean, that's how it was with Obama. They get so like I don't know if you guys are aware, but there's basically a bank that gave Obama a big list of people to hire for all these positions that they did research on, because these bankers have the best intelligence community in the world about this shit because they do the headhunting stuff and everything else, and they're like, put all these people there, and almost all of them that they gave him that list did it, and then it went from there.
Yeah, but I mean that's been standard throughout the years of politics. Is that Wall Street has a major influence in U.S. politics.
Sure do.
So your thinking is that Biden is the forerunner to win this. You think he's going to take it? You don't think Trump is going to get reelected, or did I misunderstand that?
Oh, so if Biden is the nominee?
Well, I'm just saying, which of those two candidates do you think is ultimately going to be most likely to take the election?
So in the Democratic primary, I still think the edge goes to Biden. And in the general election, I think Biden beats. I do think Biden beats Trump. You have to look at the states that were the closest. I think Biden easily carries Pennsylvania. He grew up in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And if he's the nominee, he easily wins back Pennsylvania. He probably easily wins back Michigan. And then he has to either win back the second district of Maine. And if he does that, then the Electoral College is tied 269-269. Or he has to take back either Arizona or Wisconsin, which is the bigger ask for the parties. And also you have to look at Florida. If Trump loses Florida, then the ball game is up.
Here's some a good question then. So, the meddling situation, right? I'm sure everyone is aware that the entire world meddles in our election. Do you have any data, or is there any research being done? Obviously, there is research, but I just don't know where. Research being done on the viewpoints of foreign governments, like how their Department of State equivalent, what their ideologies about certain candidates are. Are there any data points on that you can see, like, well, the Russians want this person to win, but they're going to play all the dialectics with the stuff like that, just counterintelligence equivalent, I guess.
Not off the top of my head. That would depend on what Biden comes out with as his major policies. It's going to depend on where he stands on our relationship with both our allies and our competitors, what he thinks is a good China policy, what he sees as a good policy for the Korean Peninsula. And so
Venezuela, North Korea, Iran, and all those things. There's a lot of actual discussions that I haven't really seen brought up. Like, what are their feelings on Venezuela? What are their feelings on Iran? Like, these sanctions that they're doing, and are they working? Like, I just watched the CFR thing on the sanctions the other day, on the history of sanctions too. It was pretty interesting, but knowing that's modern warfare right now, and it's at the will of the president. Like, the president could enforce them.
Well, I mean, it's not entirely at the will of the president, because the most major sanctions have to be voted on by Congress, and so there is a dangerous game you play with sanctions because, historically speaking, you want sanctions to have a bite. However, if sanctions are too strong and the entire economy collapses, sanctions are likely to have an opposite effect.
Yeah. Gotta get that oil. Sorry. Chappelle Show.
And well, I mean, I do think what is likely to happen in the coming future is that oil is going to thankfully have less and less role in politics. And I'm sure, Shogun, you're following this given your environmental background, but I think one of the major benefits, not only environmentally speaking, of electric vehicles, but it's going to allow the US and Canada to formally end our reliance on oil from politically contested areas of the world.
And because this is a conspiracy server, not also all the secret technologies that may be coming out that will be advancing our power production. Technocracy rising.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm sorry. Sorry about that, Ramanaj. So I don't know a ton about American domestic politics, to be honest. My focus is more on international politics. So I'm more needing you to just tell the people here, or if anyone in the audience wants to ask any specific questions about the election, this would be a good opportunity to do so.
Sure.
If not, can you just give us anything else you think the people should know in terms of maybe when they're voting, what they should consider the main issues, or anything else you want the people to know who might hear this podcast?
Well, so I've been very upfront that I'm not one for many conspiracy theories. I will say that the one where conspiracy theories do start, which I entirely agree with wholeheartedly, is corruption and money in politics. And so if I were asking people, what is the top 3 issues you should look at, it should be getting money out of politics and voting for a candidate who has a deliberate anti-corruption message. And so the idea in the US that has seemed to develop that free speech equals money, I think is entirely the wrong way to go, because if you essentially legalize bribery, which is what we have, then it's no longer a country buying for the people, it's buying for the major donors. And I don't think that rich people, billionaires, are entirely bad people. However, if I'm a politician and I get $1 million donation from an individual or a company, I'm going to, just by its very nature, listen to their ideas more than the ideas of the average person. And so I would say that everyone's radar has to be getting money out of politics, focusing on letting the voices of average people hold out more.
Okay, thank you. So, NSA, do you have any other questions about the election or any other comments?
Oh, I got a bunch. There's a lot of goofy things going on, like the Tulsi suing Hillary. That's an interesting one, right?
Well, I mean, that's not going to go. I mean, it's funny, but it's not going to go anywhere.
Well, it's libel rather, and if she can make the claim it costs her an election type thing, there might be something there.
Well, what was the libelous claim?
She's literally a Air Force reserve or whatever, and she's calling her a Russian asset type shit is what's going on. Like,
but how is that libelous?
Because it's affecting her campaign, or it would affect the campaign if people listen to Hillary, right?
However, but what I'm saying is for a statement to be considered libelous, it has to be, number one, untrue. Number two, it has to be made with malice, because Gabbard is a public figure.
Well, we hang people for treason, so there's obvious malice to call someone a traitor, right?
But she didn't use the word traitor. She said that she's a Russian asset.
Same thing. Like,
no, it's not. It's entirely different. If I say
no, a Russian asset. So treason, right? Hold on. Treason is, by definition, is undermining your country at the sake of another country. So to be a Russian asset, you're committing treason, which would be a felony punishable by hanging. So she is most definitely considering this person a traitor.
Well, not so fast, because you can be an asset. You can be an asset of Russia and not even know about it. Just because. Really. So it's like if I am in Gabbard's shoes, and I'm assuming that Gabbard is completely honest, her opinions are her opinions, and I'm saying what she's saying, and it is assisting Russian narratives, people could legitimately call me a Russian asset, even if I'm not working at the behest of Putin or other adversaries.
To be an asset, they would have to have leverage on you, or they would have to be paying you, or they would have to have some form of communications with you. And if you then do not contact the FBI in regards to this confirmation as a senator, for example, you would be found in violation. So she's basically saying if she's a Russian asset, that she's not reporting it to the FBI, et cetera, it's libel. It's total libel, man. Anyway.
But is Clinton claiming that Gabbard is actively working with the Russian intelligence agencies?
I don't have the quotes in front of me, otherwise I'd look into it. But I mean, it's for somebody in her shoes to make kind of those accusations, to like, especially if someone in the fucking army, like, that's a little goofy to me. But
well, I mean, you could say that her comments were unwise. However, that's completely different from saying that
Tulsi's been getting the shit end of the stick for a little while too. She has clear evidence of being censored on Google and her ads and stuff like that. Like, Tulsi's been getting fucking jacked, dude, because she's going against the military-industrial complex. She wants to end these wars and stuff like that, and that's like her platform. So she's getting total, and Yang a little bit, but I've like you can see, and Tulsi's not afraid to fight back about it. It's kind of interesting to see it unfold.
Well, I mean, she has, but I mean, Gabbard is a terrible candidate, in my opinion. And so,
right, well, but it's whatever your opinion on her, it's still like that's what's happening. Like, they are manipulating her shit so that she's catching them doing it.
Right, but I mean, we can't use that in a court of law, you can't say, look what others are doing in a case of in a case of libel against Clinton.
Well, the Clinton one's separate from the Google one. I think she has the Google one has more merit too. But like, yeah, I'm just saying in general, like she's been underthumbed big time because people like Joe Rogan were promoting her. There was a lot of like grassroots people promoting her. The military once was promoting her, not the actual complex, but the guys in military type stuff.
Right, but I mean, I'm willing to bet you a pack of cigarettes that the Gabbard allegations against Clinton go nowhere.
Look, I don't smoke, so fuck you. You work for aliens. I knew it. Put my tinfoil.
That's a whole other story, buddy.
Yeah, dude. Neurocybernetic. CFR, bro. Yeah, I love the Hillary quote. Well, I don't think everybody in the CFR is a joke type shit. If you're like a fellow and stuff in it, maybe, but like just because there's what 3,200 something people in CFR, and they all have links to major things. It's a think tank for a reason. Like,
yeah, I mean, all this. I mean, sorry to disappoint, but all of CFR is just a think tank. I mean, there's nothing real interesting about it except for the fact that they create good papers.
Yeah, if I were a senator, I would want to be a part of CFR because there's a lot of good. That's why the Hillary made that statement. We moved the State Department closer to the CFR so they could tell us what to do. Like, what a jackass! All the conspiracy guys are like, "See, I told ya." She's in the Air Force, bro. Yeah, she's a ball player. She's literally in the Air Force already, dude. Any ranking official in the Air Force, and then she's also a fucking senator, right, in Hawaii. Like one of the major points there. Yeah, she's totally a company lady, as it were. Like, yeah, but I still want to see no more wars and stop this bullshit so we can rebuild our country because it's been falling apart because we're spending $6 trillion on a fucking war we shouldn't even be in, type shit.
Which war?
All of them. Fuck it. Iraq, Afghanistan, WMDers, got them there Libyas, got them there Syrias. ISIS is a big fucking clusterfuck of mind control victims and bobbity boobity ba. Holy war. Look, who are you? I know about everything, bro. Well, we're doing a recording here, so I want to keep on topic a little bit, because we could go into random tangents on the conspiracies and stuff, but Mr. Dawson is giving us his time here for the political stuff.
And I guess
well,
one thing that I am also interested in, it's got somewhat to do with the 2020 elections. I'm not sure if you all saw the rollout of Trump's Israeli-Palestinian peace plan.
A little bit enlighten me.
Well, I mean, it's mainly a joke, just because it was designed to both prop up Trump as well as prop up Netanyahu, who is in election on actually in 1 month from today, on March the 2nd. And so Netanyahu's also under indictment for corruption charges.
Can we? Do you think we could put a sanction on them so we could get some KFCs in Palestine for them?
Well, I mean, the problem with Gaza is that it's not only an Israeli blockade; it's a joint Israeli-Egyptian blockade, and everyone forgets the Egyptian component of it. That the Sinai Peninsula has been the scene of Islamist activity at least since 2011, if not before, and the Egyptians are more than happy to keep that border closed in order for the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip to calm down.
It's like Gaza Strip.
And I mean, like in this peace plan, in Trump's peace plan, the Palestinian authorities weren't even contacted, and so this is likely an attempt to say, look at this peace plan. We're going to give the green light to the Israeli government to declare sovereignty over the settlements, to declare sovereignty over the Jordan Valley, so that a future Palestinian state, with the growing facts on the ground, will be only an enclave within Israel.
Yeah, all that stuff gets.
And it's like, and the biggest issue that people aren't focusing on is that a lot of this has an environmental component, and that the Palestinians need access to water, they need access to the Jordan River, and if Israel declares sovereignty over the Jordan Valley, then the Palestinian controlled territory has no water access.
Yeah. Or
Yep, because according to the 1967 borders, the Palestinian borders are consisting of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. In fact, I'll even post a picture of the borders.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's really brought up Israel in the discussions. I mean, so like Joe Biden, we all know he has come out and saying he's a Zionist. He's admitted to it in public. But as far as the rest of them, as their alliance to Israel, it'll be interesting backing they get, because like Russia, every country in the world meddles with America as far as elections go.
So this is more or less the Green Line, and
so you're saying the Green Line? What now?
So the Green Line was the borders agreed to in 1967. And this is Trump's plan. We can verify it because it comes from a Trump tweet. And so this is what he includes as a potential Palestinian state.
So do you also follow international politics overall? Or are you focused mostly domestic? I mean, obviously you're talking about Middle Eastern issues now. I'm just wondering, do you also study superpower politics, China, Russia, that kind of thing? Or?
Oh yeah, I study Iran, I study Russia, I study China, I study Venezuela, the protests in Chile and Argentina, really all sorts of countries.
So would you give us your take on sure, it's a big question about the overall geopolitical chessboard now, and sure, what do you think the major developments will be in our lifetime?
Sure. I mean, the reason I brought up Israel is because they're having their elections in a month from now. I would say going forward, it will be interesting to see how much cooperation you see between China and Russia, especially with China gaining population and Russia, especially east of the Urals, losing population in the Russian Far East. And because the Sino-Russian relationship is very strong and top-heavy at the presidential level, once Putin leaves the scene, where is the relationship going to go moving forward? That's going to be a very tough problem for Russia and China.
And how about in terms of a hot conflict? Do you think it's less likely than ever, more likely than ever? Is there any risk of some kind of international conflict, like open war?
Open war, you have to specify, between which powers. I would say the likelihood of the historical record shows that the likelihood of conflict between China and the U.S. is much higher than people realize, just because of the theory that with a rising power, you have with a rising power and established power, more often than not, the two countries are going to come to head, and it's going to be up to the diplomats to tone down any conflict. And when you have Xi Jinping and Trump at the helm, both leaders who are not adverse to a conflict, I don't see how they manage to keep a crisis escalation under control.
So you think there could be a semi-unintentional conflict between China and America?
Yeah, the likely lynch points will be, I doubt it will be in island construction in the South China Sea, because those features don't really matter that much. In any conflict, Chinese build up islands can be destroyed with 1 to 3 cruise missiles. And so what will likely be conflict areas are anything involving Japan, Taiwan, and possibly Hong Kong.
I had a theory that in the future, if America gets sucked into a Middle Eastern war, such as with Iran, that Russia and China may take that opportunity to simultaneously expand their geopolitical ambitions, with Putin perhaps taking more of Ukraine and Belarus, and then China perhaps trying to take Hong Kong or Taiwan. Do you think that's possible?
Unlikely, but never say never. The problem with Russia is that they already control Belarus. They already have the Union Treaty established, and so it's unlikely that Putin would want to risk a conflict with really his only ally. And with China, do they really have the wherewithal to launch an amphibious invasion of Taiwan?
Right. Well, they have developed a new sort of super troop carrier type amphibious vehicle that apparently only has one conceivable use, which would be to take Taiwan, because it'll allow them to land, thousands and thousands of soldiers at a time. So that would at least indicate that they want to keep that option on the table.
Yeah, I doubt if any conflict arises between the U.S. and Iran, which I think is pretty low to begin with. We saw from the Iranian missile strike in the U.S. base in Iraq, that it was done in such a deliberate way in order to tell the U.S., this is our one strike and now we're done. Both sides needed a political victory, a domestic political victory, and so both sides seemed to be content with what they got. The U.S. killed Qasem Soleimani, and the Iranian regime can claim credibly that they didn't take it lying down, that they did strike. They did deliberately strike the U.S. with ballistic missiles from inside Iran. And interestingly enough, according to the U.S. military, the U.S. Military saw the Iranians fueling up these missiles to begin with, and they decided not to preemptively destroy the missiles before they could be launched. And so I'm wondering if that wasn't a deliberate attempt in order to de-escalate conflict further down the road, because if the U.S. did that, then we're essentially in open conflict that we have struck Iranian territory directly.
So with regards to the Iran conflict that looks like it would go big at the beginning of this year, do you think that's going to calm down for the near future, or is it only beginning to escalate?
It's already calmed down. The fact that you have conciliatory messages of, we don't want escalation directly after the ballistic missile attack. The fact that no U.S. or Iraqi soldiers died. There were the 50 troops that were plus who were injured. However, being injured, as traumatic as that could be, it certainly beats death. And so the fact that no U.S. or allied troops were killed suggests that for at the moment that open hostilities are going to be at a low point. I do think you're going to see continued Iranian proxy activity. However, the likelihood of open conflict nation on nation between the U.S. and Iran, that crisis has probably been averted for the time being.
I see.
Well, let's see. It depends if you want straight news or opinion. One of the sources that I do like is called Agenda Free TV. I can't remember the guy's name, but he essentially just sits behind a computer and reads off news sources. That can get boring at times, but he's a pretty straightforward, down the road guy. There's local reporters in Iraq and Iran who are always the first to report on events. I would also look at any think tank fellows in Brookings and CSIS for any of those developments. So really, it depends on what is the issue that you're talking about. Obviously, if you're talking about domestic political elections, looking to CSIS would not be the smartest idea, versus looking to domestic political pundits for opinions on the Iranian conflict. You should really be looking at CSIS and Brookings fellows who have a greater history in the international think tank community. I'm assuming we're talking about Al Jazeera International, the English language component. Yeah, I mean, I think Al Jazeera is great for anything coming out of the Middle East. I would be careful though about looking at Al Jazeera Arabic, because I know a few sources try to make subtitles of Al Jazeera Arabic available and to make the subtitles available in English, and I would take that with a grain of salt, because that can sort of drift into the conspiracy theory mindset. But Al Jazeera International is a fairly well-run group. Yes, I mean, like I'll tell you about the pundits who I don't trust at all. I don't trust any of the opinion hosts on One America News. I don't trust Alex Jones. I don't trust Mike Cernovich. I don't trust Jack Probiziak, whatever his name is.
I want to have an orgy with the One American News Bureau.
Yeah, that's a hard pass for me. I will say, I'll give a shout out to Shogun. I do think that if you want to hear the opinions of the far right, or not really far right, but hard right in Canada, you do have to look at the Rebel News. Although I don't take what they say seriously, I do take the mindset of Ezra Levant seriously, in that this is what that side of Canadian politics thinks. Yeah, Ezra Levant and the Rebel was historically based in Alberta, so they're well known within the Albertan province. When Elizabeth met, I can't remember her name, but in 2015, the New Democratic Party won the elections in the provincial elections in Alberta, because the Wild Rose and Progressive Conservatives split up their vote. And one of the bills they tried to pass was called Bill 6 in Alberta, and that was a rewrite of labor laws on family farms. And the Rebel News was big on the ground in the Bill 6 protests. And also, if you are familiar with the Sun TV channel in Canada, that was an attempt by Ezra Levant and others to create a Fox News equivalent group in Canada. That failed, and Ezra Levant then moved from Toronto back to Alberta to start the Rebel News. My issue with I think they got too big for their britches. I think hiring Tommy Robinson from the UK was a major overstep. Although they fired Faith Goldy, her going down to the Charlottesville protests, or the Charlottesville white supremacist march, wasn't the smartest idea. And there's a reason that Jack Kinney, his premiership of both the Albertan United Conservative Party and now the premier of Alberta, why he decided to cut his ties with the Rebel. Um, I would. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they were. I know Ezra. I know Ezra Levant. I think he's Jewish. But I mean, I'm Jewish as well. You can be You can be Zionist, and even be Jewish, but still talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in a reasonable way, and say yes, we do think Israel should exist. Yes, the Israeli-U.S. alliance is and Canadian-Israeli alliance is a benefit to all three countries. However, Palestinians do have rights and they do deserve their own state.
Hey, so PragerU just had a little thing I watched on it that said if you don't like Zionists, you're no friend of Israel type shit, and they had a whole 5-minute thing on it. I checked that out because this is their mindset that if you don't agree with Zionism as they lay it out, you're anti-Israel and like they want to paint it like you don't believe in their state or something, which is not the case at all. I think most Americans are issues with it is that their influence in our politics. Like, I mean, in Texas, for example, you can't protest. If you want, you can't protest Israel if you want to get insurance, and then Israel targets our people for protesting Israel in colleges and stuff. So people are getting like annoyed with this, and then everybody wants to go, "No, you're a racist," and it's like, no, not at all.
Well, I mean, the problem is a lot of that. Hold on, a lot of that in Texas comes from. Yeah, I mean, a lot of that in Texas comes from the Christian right because at the end, the Christian right they seek. I mean, the majority are normal are average people who say, you know, we want to support Israel. They're a great ally to the U.S.
Yeah.
However, behind that is a view of end times prophecy of Israel needs to declare sovereignty over Jerusalem and especially over the Temple Mount, which will cause
It's not in Texas.
global conflict, which will cause Jesus to return and Armageddon to begin.
Well, so it's not so much Texas; it's just any college though. This is going on all over the place. But so Phil Levine, the guy on Fox, he does an interview. He got the head evangelist guy or whatever, and he made a quote saying, you know, there's 60 million evangelists in the world, and they believe the Bible is the word of God. And he's very close friends with Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's the biggest evangelist Christian here because they, you know, in the Bible, it's in the way he said it specifically was that Jerusalem is the only city in the world chosen by God. So for the Israelites and all this other stuff, and because the Bible is the word of God, etc. So you know, they work in tandem with our, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, that's whatever their religion is. It's for your religion, right? But that's one, you know, he said he's very close friends with a leader. You know, the religious leader of evangelists is very close friends with a political leader in a country. It's odd to me, but it's whatever.
I mean, I think someone asked Netanyahu before, they asked the question, what do you think about getting all of this Christian support, and are you aware of this end times prophecy? And Netanyahu's only response was, well, we accept their support, and it doesn't really change the fact because we know the truth.
Yeah, I don't know what that really means, but I can only assume.
Well, I mean, it means from his perspective, we know what they're claiming isn't going to happen, but we're more than willing to accept their support anyways.
Yeah, well, but besides the whole back and forth of the religions and the Jewish culture, There's a lot of misconstruing and propaganda around it. It's kind of goofy. Both sides are fucking making up all kinds of enamorous things that are just like, whoa. But yeah.
Well, the problem is the Palestinians are also being treated poorly by especially on the Gaza Strip by Hamas themselves. And so when Hamas goes into the middle of a residential neighborhood and launches 6 rockets, they're doing that knowing that Israel is going to respond to destroy the rocket sites, and Hamas is hoping that in the process, Palestinian civilians get killed, so they can use the death of the civilians as a rallying cry against Israel. I mean, I lean towards the latter. I don't believe in in the New World conspiracy theory at all. I think it's all a bunch of BS.
Well, but George Bush said George Bush said it 42 times in speeches in a few years' time. I mean, it's a thing the presidents are talking about. And the conspiracy might be overblown. Yeah.
I mean,
I think it's an alien New World Order, but that's me.
I know George H.W. Bush gave the speeches, but in my opinion, those were about the end of the Cold War and going into a period where it was no longer superpower versus superpower. It was now the U.S. is the sole superpower. Some use the term hyperpower, and so we can now move into a new world order, so to speak, where peace could be at hand. I mean, this was
no. So in that speech, he defined it as where we live by law of the land, not law of the jungle, and all this other stuff. He wanted to get all these countries in some kind of law set that was global and unifying, whether you call it UN or something else. They wanted something like.
Yeah, this was Francis Fukuyama's piece, the end of history. Now, I do think that everyone was drinking the Kool-Aid of thinking that the era of great power competition was over, and that everyone was going to live and hold hands and sing Kumbaya. However, I can also respect it because these are people who have lived only knowing the USSR versus US competition ever since the end of World War II, and now the USSR no longer exists. Can we finally have a a peace movement. At the time, China was racked with internal conflict. Tiananmen Square had just occurred. The Chinese GDP was still below Japan's, and so they still hadn't. They were still undergoing their rise. Russia was decimated with ecological disaster. They had seen. They were in the process of seeing 15 to 16 countries break off. And so if that happens, and I was a official of any Western power, I would say, well, maybe we can finally unify Europe, such as what happened with the expansion of the EU. Maybe we can finally get rid of old conflicts and come together as not nation states, but as people of the globe. However, it's 2020 now. It's been about 30 years. We can say, that was a aspirational goal, but that goal has utterly failed.
Yeah, General Clark. Yeah. General Clark said the same thing on NPR after 9/11. Same exact thing. We're going to invade all these countries. Yeah.
You can't watch what?
I found it still. But yeah, that's I linked it just. I don't know. There's a guy that has it though. Yeah, there's some stuff that gets scrubbed for sure. I mean, there's some little clips and videos and quotes and things like that. Like Rockefeller's got a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I can't watch it. I can't watch it now, but I think this is what you're referring to from Democracy Now!
Yeah, this is the one where it's where he says if all you have is a hammer, everything's a nail, and we got the 7 countries and everything's lined up and all that. Yeah.
And this is from YouTube.
This is from Democracy Now! In YouTube.
I mean, I think people care about the Bilderberg Group way too much. In my opinion, it's just it's like the World Economic Forum where leaders come together to discuss important issues. And especially with all the conflict going on, we should welcome a forum where world leaders come together to talk about these issues in a closed off environment where the normal ruminations of politics are left at the door.
Yeah, I think it's all that too, except I think at the end of the day, everybody in that believes in Lucifer, and these aliens are playing Lucifer with holograms. We'll see.
Mhm. All right, yeah, I'll check it out. Yep. And let's see, Shogun, we should probably circle back and finish up the 2020 elections for a few minutes, and then call it quits and go into any other discussion that people want.
Yeah, sorry, I let this kind of go free flow and got away from original topic. I apologize for that, but please, anything else you wanted to cover or any other issues you wanted to bring back up to get us back on track, please?
No, the only thing I'll say is that to people, watch the results coming out of Iowa. One thing I failed to mention is that people are worried, I think rightfully so, that, I mean, you have to look at the caucuses, which is not, the caucus is not where a person just comes in and says, I'm voting for candidate X and walks out the door. You have to listen to speeches, and you have to listen to people saying, you know, this is why I'm supporting candidate X. And you have a lot of cross groups going back and forth saying, you know, I supported this candidate, but they're not going to get my votes, so we're going to support this candidate. And the caucus results are announced in real time, even when other parties are still doing their caucuses. And so the Sanders campaign is likely going to announce the results of caucus locations prior to the completion of caucus events in other parts of the state in order to convince as many people as possible to abandon their candidate and support Bernie. And so I'd be interested in to see how that plays out. I could go three ways. Right now, it's probably between Bernie and Biden, with Warren a distant third. I give Trump merit on when he does well. I do think the new trade deal between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, I think that is going to be a benefit to all three countries. The biggest loser in that is actually Germany, because Germany was using the old NAFTA provisions in order to ship car components through Mexico, claiming that they were built in the U.S. under obscure NAFTA provisions. I do think getting out of the Middle Eastern conflicts and focusing on great power competition with Russia and China, I do think that is a benefit. However, there is growing political polarization issue, which has been in effect ever since the 90s, and I don't think Trump realizes that as president, your job isn't just to unify the Republican Party or unify your political party; it's to unify the country. One of the biggest images you saw is after Clinton's failed impeachment. Clinton came out and apologized to the country for leading for his actions in leading to this impact. I don't think Trump is going to come out and apologize for his actions in Ukraine that brought the country to the breach of a constitutional crisis. And so I don't think Trump yet truly understands the magnitude that as president, you can't let the petty stuff get to you, and you have to be a grand unifier. Now, he has the ability to be a unifier. A lot of his speeches talk about bringing the country together, and if he were to more focus on that, he'd be a much better president. Well, I mean, he's a grandiose narcissist, but newsflash, he's a politician. All politicians are going to be narcissists in some way, and so I don't see. I think Trump is maybe more of a narcissist, but I mean that's not really saying much. I don't. No. I do think. I don't think Trump is personally racist. However, his statements, especially after the Charlottesville protests, of claiming that there were bad people on both sides, I do think that was a turning point. And I'm not sure. Maybe he sees that doing that was the wrong thing. I hope he does. But in the aftermath of saying that there's both sides, that there were good people on both sides of the neo-Nazis and the counter-protesters, that was probably not the smartest move. Well, I mean, like I would ask who are the good guys? If you're carrying around a torch saying the Jews will not replace us, I'm going to assume that you're anti-Semitic, if not worse.
On that point, what do you think about the talk about some kind of civil war or militia action or something along these lines in America? Maybe some kind of increasing divisions between the left and the right, Antifa and Proud Boys. Like, how far do you think that's going to go in terms of civil disunity?
I do worry about increasing polarization. However, I don't have any worries about a civil war breaking out. In the 1960 election, Abraham Lincoln wasn't even on the ballot in many of the southern states, and so you could honestly say that the support for Lincoln in this state was 0%. In the most Republican state in the country, Wyoming, Clinton still gets 23% of the vote. In the most liberal state, California and Hawaii, Trump still gets around 30% of the vote. And so when the state is split 70-30, obviously this side with 70 still has a great advantage, but I mean 30 is still 30, it's not 0. And so the idea that there's going to be a civil war, in my opinion, is nuts, and it's not supported by any facts.
Mr. Richard Dawson, can you say anything about your aspirations in your personal or professional life? Are you looking into politics? Is it something you could talk about?
Well, probably not. All I'll say is that my goal for the country moving forward is that we come to grips with an increasing population that's born overseas. We come to grips with increasing political and economic power of minorities and members not of the traditional power, and that we get to a point where we more compare ourselves to other Americans than we do to people who live in other countries. Because if we continue down this road of saying I identify more with Russians than my fellow Americans, we're still going to have the same problems going forward.
Well, this has been a great podcast. Thank you for coming on and covering all this political stuff. And thank you, Franklin and NSA, for bringing in some of the conspiracy angle. Is there anything that you want to cover before we wrap up another excellent episode? Was there anything else you wanted to say, Mr. Dawson, on this platform? We can always have you back anytime for other subjects.
Yeah, no, I'll just say stay tuned for tomorrow's results. And if you're listening to the recording of this, you can go back and see how the results have been in Iowa, New Hampshire, and possibly Nevada and South Carolina. I'd look at those I'd be looking at those 4 states and the results that come out.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much. Thank you, Tech, for recording. Thank you to NSA and Franklin for participating. And thank you especially to Mr. Richard Dawson for being our special guest today. Please check out the Roundtable Discord server. You can find us through Conspiracy on Discord or just Google Roundtable Discord. You can also find us on all social media. And you can check out our website as well. So thanks a lot, and Now, everyone who wishes, we should jump down to the round table and continue with some casual conversation.